You should not be here. The words left Nora's lips in a whisper that barely disturbed the midnight air, but they might as well have been shouted for all the good they did. Alpha King Theron Nightshade stood 10 feet away, his massive frame backlit by moonlight filtering through the ancient willow's cascading branches. And he did not move. He did not speak. He simply watched her with those impossible silver eyes that seemed to see straight through every lie she had ever told, every mask she had ever worn, every desperate attempt she had made to disappear into the background of a life that was never truly hers. Nora's fingers closed around the pendant, the metal still warm from where it had been buried beneath the gnarled roots for the past 6 months, and she felt the familiar pulse of power that both terrified and comforted her. This was the 3rd time she had moved it this year. 3 times she had waited until the pack slept, until even the night patrol had passed, until she was certain no one would see her slip between the trees to this sacred place where the oldest willow in Moonridge territory had stood for centuries. 3 times she had dug with her bare hands, ignoring the dirt beneath her fingernails and the ache in her shoulders, to relocate the one piece of her true identity she had not been able to destroy. And now, on this 3rd time, she had finally been caught. I asked you a question, Omega. Theron's voice was like gravel and smoke, each word carefully measured in a way that made her wolf, dormant and silent for so many years, suddenly stir deep within her chest. It was not an aggressive stirring, not the way her wolf should react to an alpha, especially not the Alpha King whose reputation for ruthlessness had reached every corner of the kingdom. No, this was something else entirely, something that made her blood heat and her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition. What are you hiding? He took a step forward, and Nora took one back, her spine pressing against the rough bark of the willow. The pendant seemed to grow warmer in her palm, its ancient magic responding to his proximity in a way it never had before. And she knew with absolute certainty that if she did not leave this clearing right now, everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made, every piece of herself she had buried alongside this cursed heirloom, would be for nothing. Nothing that concerns you, your Majesty. She forced the words out with as much steadiness as she could manage, which was not much considering her entire world was crumbling around her. She had survived 3 years in Moonridge by being invisible, by accepting every slight and insult with downcast eyes, by never drawing attention, or asking questions, or giving anyone a reason to look at her too closely. 3 years of scrubbing floors and serving meals, and sleeping in the smallest room in the Omega quarters, all because being forgotten was safer than being remembered. Being nobody was safer than being Nora Silvius, last daughter of the Silver Moon bloodline, survivor of the massacre that should have killed her along with her entire family when she was 15 years old. I was just taking a walk. I could not sleep. It was a pathetic lie, made more pathetic by the fact that she was clearly kneeling in freshly turned earth with dirt smeared across her simple dress and her hair falling loose from its braid. But it was all she had. Theron did not laugh, though something that might have been amusement flickered across his harsh features. He was devastatingly handsome in the way that dangerous things often were, all sharp angles and controlled power, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from some battle she had heard whispered about, but never confirmed. He had arrived at Moonridge 5 days ago for the Trials of Unity, the decennial gathering, where Alpha King met with the leaders of every major pack to renew alliances and settle disputes, and in those 5 days, he had turned her carefully constructed life upside down. Not intentionally, or at least she did not think it was intentional. He had simply looked at her. Once, during the welcome feast where she had been serving wine, his eyes had found hers across the crowded hall, and something had passed between them that she still could not name. Something that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. Something that made her wolf wake up for the first time since she had forced it into dormancy to hide what she truly was. Show me. It was not a request. Alpha Kings did not make requests. They made commands, and every instinct Nora possessed screamed at her to obey. Her wolf whined, actually whined, pressing against the mental barriers she had spent years reinforcing, begging her to submit to this male who smelled like pine and winter storms, and something wild that called to every buried part of her. But submission meant exposure, and exposure meant death. Not just her death, though that would be terrible enough, but the death of everything her bloodline represented. Every secret her mother had whispered to her in those final moments as their pack burned, every responsibility that had been placed on her two young shoulders when she became the last Sylvius standing. Show me what you are hiding, Omega, and I will decide if it concerns me. Theron moved. Closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that his scent overwhelmed every other sensation. Or I can take it from you. Your choice. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Nora's hand tightened around the pendant until the edges bit into her palm, until she felt the warm trickle of blood where the metal cut skin. The pain helped, grounding her in reality. When every nerve ending seemed to be screaming at her to do something spectacularly stupid, like trust the male standing before her. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Trust was what had gotten her family killed, gotten her pack destroyed, gotten her running for her life at 15 with nothing but the clothes on her back and a pendant that marked her for death if anyone ever discovered what it meant. It is just a necklace, she said, and even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. A keepsake from my mother. Nothing valuable. Nothing important. Just sentiment. She tried to move past him, to slip between his massive frame and the willow trunk. But he was faster than she anticipated. His hand caught her wrist, gentle despite his obvious strength, and the moment his skin touched hers, the pendant flared hot enough to burn. She gasped, he cursed, and the world around them stopped. Literally stopped. The wind that had been rustling through the willow branches ceased mid-gust. The distant sound of an owl hunting in the forest cut off abruptly. Even the moonlight seemed to freeze, suspended in shafts of silver that no longer moved or shifted with the passage of clouds. Time itself had paused, holding them in a bubble of impossible stillness, where nothing existed except Nora, Theron, and the pendant that was now glowing with a light that should have been impossible, that should not exist, that marked her as clearly as if she had announced her true name to the entire kingdom. Ancient runes appeared on its surface, swirling patterns that she had only ever seen once before, on the night her mother pressed it into her hands and told her to run, to hide, to survive no matter what it cost. The runes spelled out a prophecy that Nora had spent 8 years pretending did not exist. Words in the old language that roughly translated to something she had never wanted to believe was true. Silver moon and nightshade crown, bound by fate when moon hangs down. Power split. Must reunite, or endless war shall claim the night. Theron spoke the words softly, his silver eyes fixed on the glowing pendant, and Nora felt her carefully constructed world shatter into a million irreparable pieces. He knew the old language. He knew the prophecy, which meant he knew, or would know the moment he put the pieces together, exactly who and what she was. You are Sylvius. It was not a question, but she shook her head anyway, denying what could no longer be denied, even as tears she refused to shed, burned behind her eyes. You are the last of the Silver Moon bloodline, the daughter everyone believed died in the purge, and you have been hiding here, in this forgotten pack, pretending to be nothing. His grip on her wrist shifted, his thumb finding her racing pulse point, as if to confirm she was real, and not some phantom conjured by wishful thinking. How long, Nora? How long have you been running? My whole life. The admission came out broken, each word scraping against Ian, her throat like broken glass. But once she started, she could not stop. The dam had broken, or perhaps it had been crumbling all along, and Theron's presence was simply the final crack that brought it all tumbling down. Since I was 15. Since the night Alpha Garrett and his beta wolves came to Silver Moon territory under a banner of truce and slaughtered everyone. My father, my mother, my 3 brothers, every warrior and elder and child who could not run fast enough. They burned our ancestral grounds and salted the earth so nothing would grow there again. They took our lands, absorbed our remaining pack members into their own, and declared the Sylvius line extinct. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. Everyone believed them because why would they not? Garrett was respected, his pack was powerful, and we were just one more casualty in the endless territorial disputes that plague our kind. Nobody questioned it. Nobody investigated. And I survived only because my mother threw me out a window and told me to run, and never stop running until I was so far away that no one would ever connect me to Silver Moon. Theron was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the frozen moonlight, and Nora braced herself for what would come next. Rejection, probably, or worse, exploitation. The Sylvius bloodline was valuable not because of sentiment, but because of power. Ancient power that dated back to the first packs, to the original wolves who could command the moon itself, who could stop time and bend reality and do 100 other impossible things that modern werewolves had forgotten how to access. That power ran through her veins, dormant but present, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken it fully. The pendant was both key and lock, the physical manifestation of her bloodline's magic, and in the wrong hands it could be used to dominate every pack in the kingdom. In the right hands, it could unite them, could end the centuries of territorial warfare and political maneuvering that kept their kind weak and divided. The prophecy was clear about that much, even if Nora had spent years refusing to acknowledge what it meant for her personally. Garrett is dead. Theron's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts with the bluntness of an executioner's blade. I killed him myself 2 years ago, when I discovered he had been orchestrating attacks on smaller packs and blaming them on rogues to justify absorbing their territories. He died badly, if it is any consolation, though I did not know about Silver Moon at the time. I thought it was just another land grab, another ambitious alpha overstepping his bounds. His thumb traced small circles on her wrist, a gesture that should have been soothing but somehow made her even more aware of how close he was, how easily he could snap her bones if he chose to. If I had known about you, about what he did to your family, I would have made his death slower, more painful. There was something in his voice that made her believe him, a cold fury that spoke of justice long delayed but not forgotten. The pendant recognizes me, Nora. It stopped time because we are both here, because the prophecy is activating whether we want it to or not. Do you know what that means? She knew. Of course she knew. She had spent 8 years researching everything she could find about the prophecy, reading every dusty text in every pack library she could sneak into, trying to find a loophole, or alternative interpretation that would free her from a destiny she had never asked for. It means you are my mate. The words tasted like surrender, like the death of every plan she had ever made, every hope she had nurtured for a quiet life, where she could simply exist without the weight of her bloodline crushing her. The prophecy requires the union of Sylvius and Nightshade bloodlines to unlock the full power of the ancient magic. Silver Moon and Nightshade crown. Bound by fate. You are Nightshade, descended from the same first wolves as I am, and the pendant will not stop glowing until we either accept the bond or one of us dies. She finally met his eyes, her own burning with unshed tears and a fury she had been suppressing for far too long. So, which is it going to be, Your Majesty? Are you going to kill me to prevent anyone else from using me as a weapon? Or are you going to chain me to your side and use me yourself? Because those seem to be my only options, and I cannot decide which would be worse. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Theron released her wrist abruptly and stepped back, and Nora immediately felt the loss of his warmth like a physical blow. The pendant's glow dimmed slightly, but did not extinguish, and the frozen world around them remained suspended in impossible stillness. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that was almost human in its frustration, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something other than the cold Alpha King mask he showed the world. She saw exhaustion and loneliness, and something that looked almost like hope, though she could not imagine what someone like him had to hope for. He had everything anyone could want: power, respect, territory that spanned half the kingdom, warriors who would die at his command. What could he possibly lack? "I am not going to kill you, Nora." His voice was softer now, almost gentle, and somehow that was more terrifying than his earlier commands. "And I am not going to chain you or use you or force you into anything you do not want. Those are not your only options, though I understand why you believe they are. Then what do you want?" She hated how small her voice sounded, how young and uncertain. But she was so tired of being strong, so tired of running and hiding and pretending to be someone she was not. 3 years in Moonridge, 5 years before that bouncing between packs and trying to stay invisible. 8 years total of living half a life because she was too afraid to claim her full one. 8 years of forcing her wolf into dormancy, of suppressing every instinct and ability that made her who she was, of watching from the shadows while others lived the lives she should have had. What could you possibly want from someone like me? I am nobody. I have nothing. Everything that made me valuable died with my pack. And the pendant is just a curse disguised as inheritance. I want what? The prophecy promises. Theron moved closer again, but this time he kept his hands to himself, respecting the space she clearly needed, even as his presence filled her awareness completely. I want to end the endless cycle of violence and territorial disputes that have plagued our kind for centuries. I want to unite the packs under a leadership they can trust, under a system that values cooperation over domination. I want to build something that lasts, something that means my grandchildren will not have to fight the same battles I have been fighting my entire reign. He paused, his silver eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her want to look away, but refused to let her. And yes, Nora, I want you. Not because of the pendant or the prophecy or the power you represent, though those things matter strategically. I want you because the moment I saw you across that feast hall 5 days ago, my wolf recognized what my mind was too stubborn to accept immediately. You are mine. Mine. To protect. Mine to cherish. Mine to stand beside as an equal and not a possession. The mate bond does not lie, even when we wish it would. Nora shook her head, backing away until her shoulders hit the willow trunk again, trapped between ancient wood and impossible choices. You do not know me. You do not know anything about me except what you have learned in the past 10 minutes. How can you say I am yours when we are strangers? But even as she protested, her wolf surged forward with a strength she had not felt in years, howling with joy and recognition, trying to force a shift she would not allow. Her skin burned, her bones ached with the suppressed transformation, and she had to physically bite her tongue to maintain control. The mate bond was pulling at her, a golden thread she could suddenly perceive connecting her to Theron, growing stronger with every moment they stood in this frozen bubble of time. It terrified her more than Garrett's wolves, more than 8 years of running, more than the thought of her own death, because it meant surrendering control, and control was all she had left. I know enough. Theron's voice was steady, confident in a way that made her simultaneously want to scream and believe him. I know you survived when you should have died, which takes either incredible luck or incredible strength, and I do not believe in luck. I know you have been living as an omega in a second-rate pack, accepting treatment that should enrage any wolf with pride, which means you value survival over ego. I know you moved this pendant 3 times this year, which means you are careful and paranoid and smart enough to never establish patterns. I know you could have tried to use your bloodline for political leverage at any point in the past 8 years, could have approached any major alpha with your identity and demanded sanctuary or alliance, but you chose obscurity instead. That tells me you understand the value of patience, of waiting for the right moment rather than acting out of desperation. He smiled, and it transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. And I know that when you looked at me 5 days ago across that feast hall, you felt it too. The recognition, the pull, the certainty that something significant was happening, even if you did not want it to. Do not insult either of us by denying it now. She wanted to deny it anyway, wanted to tell him he was wrong and arrogant, and seeing things that were not there. But she could not. She had felt it. From that first moment when their eyes met, and something electric had passed between them. Something that made her spill the wine she was carrying, and stammer an apology to the beta she had been serving. She had felt it every time she caught sight of him over the past 5 days, every time his scent reached her across the training grounds or the dining hall, or the pack house corridors. She had felt it in her dreams, where her wolf ran free, and a massive black wolf with silver eyes ran beside her, and she woke each morning more exhausted than when she had gone to sleep, because even her subconscious was betraying her. Feeling something does not mean we have to act on it. She tried one last desperate argument, knowing it was futile but unable to stop herself. We can walk away right now. You can forget you saw me here. Forget about the pendant. Forget about the prophecy. Go back to being Alpha King without the complication of a mate you never wanted. I will disappear like I should have years ago. Go somewhere so remote that no one will ever find me, and we can both live our lives separately. The prophecy does not have to be fulfilled. It does not work that way, and you know it. Theron's words were gentle but implacable. The truth she had been avoiding finally spoken aloud where she could not ignore it. The prophecy is already activating. Time is frozen around us because the pendant recognized that we are both here, both aware of what we are to each other, and it will not release us until we make a choice. Either we accept the bond and whatever comes with it, or we reject it completely, which would likely kill us both, given how powerful the magic is. There is no walking away, Nora. There is no going back to how things were 5 days ago, before I knew you existed, and you knew I was your mate. We can only move forward, together or not at all. He extended his hand toward her, palm up in invitation rather than demand. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I am not asking you to forget 8 years of trauma and pain and justified paranoia. I am just asking you to take the first step. Take my hand. Let the pendant complete its awakening and see what happens. If you hate what you find, if the reality does not match the promise, I will personally help you disappear so thoroughly that no one will ever find you. That is my oath to you, as Alpha King and as your mate. Nora stared at his outstretched hand like it was a viper preparing to strike. Every instinct she had cultivated screaming at her to refuse, to fight, to maintain the independence that had kept her alive all these years. But beneath that survival instinct, buried under layers of fear and anger and grief, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of suppressing everything that made her who she was in service of a safety that was ultimately an illusion. Garrett was dead. The immediate threat that had driven her into hiding no longer existed, and while there would always be wolves who wanted to exploit her bloodline, there would also always be that risk no matter how well she hid. The pendant had made sure of that by reacting to Theron's presence. The secret was out, at least to him, and she could either let that destroy her, or she could use it to finally reclaim the life that had been stolen from her when she was 15. Slowly, heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it, Nora reached out and placed her hand in his. The moment their palms touched, the pendant exploded with light so bright she had to close her eyes against it, and the frozen world around them shattered like glass. Time rushed back in a dizzying wave of sensation. Wind howling through the willow branches. The owl resuming its hunting cry. Clouds scudding across the moon as if they had never stopped. But more than that, she felt the mate bond snap into place with a force that drove her to her knees, a golden chain wrapping around her heart and pulling tight, connecting her to Theron in a way that went beyond physical or even magical. She could feel his emotions bleeding into hers, his shock and awe and fierce protective joy mixing with her own terror and hope and desperate longing until she could not tell where she ended and he began. Her wolf surged forward with a triumphant howl, no longer willing to be suppressed, and Nora's body began to shift whether she wanted it to or not. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles tore and reknit, skin rippled with fur the color of moonlight itself, and she heard Theron's sharp intake of breath as her true form was revealed for the first time in 8 years. She was not a large wolf by any standard, certainly not compared to the alpha warriors who dominated most packs, but there was something undeniably powerful about her silver coat that seemed to glow with its own internal light, about the ancient runes that appeared along her flanks in the same script as the pendant, about the way the very air around her hummed with barely contained magic. This was what she had been hiding, what she had suppressed and denied and pretended did not exist. This was Nora Silvius, last daughter of Silver Moon, carrier of bloodline magic that had not been seen in generations, and she was magnificent. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Theron shifted as well, his transformation smooth and practiced in a way that spoke of decades of experience, and Nora found herself staring up at the largest wolf she had ever seen. His coat was black as midnight, with silver guard hairs that caught the moonlight, and his eyes remained that impossible silver even in wolf form, watching her with an intelligence and awareness that made her wolf preen under his attention. He was every inch the Alpha King in this form, raw power contained in muscle and fang and an aura of dominance that should have made her want to submit immediately. But instead of fear or the instinctive need to bare her throat, she felt only curiosity and a strange sense of rightness, as if this was exactly where she was supposed to be, standing before him as his equal, rather than his subordinate. He approached slowly, giving her time to bolt if she chose. But Nora held her ground. The pendant, now hanging from a chain that had somehow survived the transformation, glowed softly between them, and she could feel the prophecy magic thrumming through every nerve ending. Theron touched his nose to hers, in a gesture that was intimate, and claiming all at once, and Nora felt the final piece of the mate bond lock into place, with an almost audible click. The runes on her flanks flared brighter, matching ones that were now visible on Theron's own dark coat, ancient symbols that marked them as bonded, in a way that went beyond anything modern werewolves understood. They were not just mates now. They were something more, something older and more powerful, the physical embodiment of a prophecy that promised either salvation or destruction, depending on how they wielded what they had been given. A sound from the forest beyond the clearing shattered the moment. Heavy footfalls approaching at a run, and both wolves spun toward the threat. Nora's hackles rose instinctively, her lips pulling back from her teeth, even though she had not been in a fight since she was 15, and was not at all confident in her ability to defend herself. But Theron stepped in front of her immediately, placing his massive body between her and whatever was coming, and she felt a surge of gratitude that warred with her independent pride. She did not need protecting, did not want to be the weak female hiding behind her strong male. But the practical part of her brain acknowledged that she was out of practice and exhausted, and still reeling from the bond's completion. If something attacked right now, she would be more liability than asset. Beta Marcus burst into the clearing, his human form dressed in the formal leathers that marked him as part of the Alpha King's personal guard, and he skidded to a halt when he saw both wolves facing him. His eyes widened, darting between Theron's obvious form and Nora's glowing silver coat, and she saw the moment recognition and shock flashed across his features. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice carefully neutral despite the circumstances. "We have a situation. Alpha Ren from Moonridge has called an emergency council meeting. He is accusing one of the Omegas of theft, claiming something valuable went missing from the storage vaults tonight, and he is demanding permission to conduct a full search of the Omega quarters." His gaze flickered to Nora again, understanding dawning in his expression. He specifically mentioned a female Omega who has been acting suspicious lately. I believe his exact words were that she was probably hoarding supplies to run away, and that he wanted to make an example of her before she could flee and damage the pack's reputation. Nora felt ice flood her veins despite the warmth of her fur. Alpha Ren was not a cruel man by werewolf standards, but he was ambitious and easily influenced, which made him dangerous in a different way. If someone had convinced him that she was a threat or a thief, if they had planted evidence or simply whispered the right suggestions, he would absolutely conduct a search. And when that search turned up nothing in her quarters because she owned virtually nothing, he would expand it to the territories she frequented. Like this clearing. Like the ancient willow with its disturbed roots and the freshly turned earth that anyone with eyes could see marked recent digging. They would find where she had been burying the pendant, would start asking questions about why an Omega was sneaking around at night, would investigate her background more thoroughly than they had when she arrived 3 years ago with forged papers and a story about being a refugee from a dissolved pack. And once they started pulling that thread, the entire careful tapestry of lies she had constructed would unravel. Theron shifted back to human form with fluid ease, apparently unconcerned about his nudity, in the way only someone completely comfortable with their body and status could be. "Tell Alpha Ren that I will attend his council meeting personally, and that no search will be conducted without my explicit approval." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that made Beta Marcus straighten instinctively despite his own significant rank. "Also inform him that I am invoking ancient right of claiming. The female Omega in question is my mate, recognized and bonded as of tonight, and any accusations against her will be treated as accusations against me personally. If he has concerns about theft, he can bring them to me directly, and I will investigate as I see fit." Marcus's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline, but he nodded sharply and turned to leave. "Marcus," Theron called after him, and the Beta paused. "Have someone bring clothing to this clearing for both myself and my mate, and then clear the area. No one approaches without my permission. Understood?" "Understood, Your Majesty." Marcus disappeared back into the forest at a run, and Nora was left staring at Theron with a mix of gratitude and terror. He had just publicly claimed her as his mate, had invoked ancient laws that she was not even sure were still recognized in modern pack politics, had put his own reputation and authority on the line to protect her from an accusation that might or might not be legitimate. It was exactly the kind of impulsive protective gesture that should have made her feel safe. But instead it made her feel trapped. Because now she was his responsibility whether she wanted to be or not. Now every pack in the kingdom would know about her, would be watching and speculating and trying to figure out how to exploit this new dynamic for their own benefit. She shifted back to human form, grateful for the long curtain of silver hair that fell around her like a cloak, providing at least minimal modesty. "You should not have done that." The words came out sharper than she intended, frustration and fear making her tone harsh. "You should have let him conduct his search, let him find nothing, and moved on. Now you have drawn attention to me, made me a person of interest, and every wolf in Moonridge will be talking about the Alpha King's mysterious Omega mate by morning. Do you have any idea what you have just done? The target you have just painted on both of our backs?" She wanted to pace, to move, to do something with the nervous energy coursing through her. But she was also acutely aware of her nakedness and his, and how very alone they were in this clearing. The prophecy was supposed to be secret. My identity was supposed to be secret. And you just announced to everyone within earshot that I am important enough for you to invoke ancient rites over. Yes. Theron's simple agreement took the wind out of her angry sails, leaving her deflated and uncertain. I know exactly what I did, Nora. I made a choice. The same choice I have been trying to get you to make for the past hour. I chose you. I chose us. I chose to stop hiding what we are, and face whatever consequences come from that honesty together rather than separately. He moved closer, still maintaining enough distance to not crowd her, and she hated how much she wanted to close that gap, to feel his warmth and strength, and the certainty he seemed to carry so easily. You are right that this will draw attention. You are right that there will be wolves who try to exploit our bond or use you to get to me. You are right that keeping secrets would have been safer, at least in the short term. But safety is not the same as living, and I did not spend the past 15 years building my reputation and power just to hide the most important thing that has ever happened to me because I was afraid of political complications. You have known I was your mate for less than 2 hours. Nora's voice was quieter now, the fight draining out of her as exhaustion swept in to replace it. How can you be so certain about this? About me? About throwing away caution for someone you literally just met? She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm night air, and felt tears finally spill over to track down her cheeks. I do not know how to do this, Theron. I do not know how to be someone's mate. How to trust anyone that completely. How to let someone see all the broken parts of me and not run away. I have spent 8 years making sure no one got close enough to matter, and now you are asking me to let you in completely, and I am so scared I can barely breathe. In 3 strides, Theron closed the distance between them and pulled her against his chest, his arms, wrapping around her with a gentleness that contradicted his intimidating size. Nora stiffened instinctively, prepared to fight or flee, but his scent surrounded her. Pine and winter storms, and something uniquely him that made her wolf sigh with contentment. You do not have to know how, he murmured against her hair, his voice rumbling through his chest in a way that she felt more than heard. Neither of us knows how because neither of us has done this before. We figure it out together one day. At a time, one decision at a time. You do not have to trust me completely right now. You do not have to let me see everything. You just have to agree not to run, to give this bond a real chance before you decide it is not worth the risk. His hand came up to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her silver hair. And for what it is worth, I do not think you are broken. I think you are a survivor who did what she had to do to stay alive in impossible circumstances. There is no shame in that, Nora. There is only strength. A rustling from the forest edge announced the arrival of clothing, a bundle tossed into the clearing by someone who wisely did not show their face or linger to see if their delivery was appreciated. Theron released her reluctantly, retrieving the bundle and handing her a simple dress that was far nicer than anything she had owned in years, soft fabric that felt like silk against her skin. He pulled on pants and a shirt with efficient movements, and Nora tried very hard not to notice the play of muscles across his back, or the way his shoulders filled out the fabric in a way that made her mouth go dry. This was her mate. This impossibly strong, impossibly handsome, impossibly patient male was hers by right of prophecy and fate, and a bond she could no longer deny even if she wanted to. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. So what happens now? She asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the moment time unfroze and the bond completed, the question that encompassed every uncertainty and fear she had about the future. Do I go back to my quarters and pretend nothing happened? Do I pack my belongings, which would take all of 5 minutes since I own almost nothing, and move into whatever accommodations you have arranged? Do we face Alpha Wren's council meeting together and deal with whatever accusations he wants to make? Do we tell people about the prophecy or keep that part secret? She laughed, but it was a brittle sound with no humor behind it. I have been making survival decisions for 8 years, Theron. I am very good at running and hiding and staying alive by the skin of my teeth. I am terrible at planning for a future that includes anyone else or anything beyond the next immediate threat. You are going to have to guide me here because I am completely lost. Theron finished dressing and turned to face her fully, his expression serious but not unkind. Now we go back to the pack house together. Not to your Omega quarters, but to my rooms, which are considerably more comfortable and secure. You stay there tonight, get some sleep if you can manage it, and tomorrow we deal with Alpha Ren and his council meeting as a united front. We tell them that you are my mate, that the bond is complete and recognized, and that any questions about your background or behavior can be directed to me. He paused, considering his next words carefully. As for the prophecy and your true identity, that remains between us for now. Revealing that you are Sylvius would create complications we are not ready to handle yet, and there is no immediate benefit to making that information public. Better to let people accept you as the Alpha King's mate first, let them get used to your presence and position, and then reveal the rest when we are ready to use it strategically. It was a reasonable plan, as much as Nora hated to admit it. Going public with her bloodline right now would indeed create chaos, would have every ambitious alpha in the kingdom either trying to kill her as a threat or court her as an asset. Better to establish her position as Theron's mate first, to build alliances and protections before revealing the full extent of what she represented. It was the kind of long-term strategic thinking that she had lost somewhere in the day-to-day struggle to survive, and she felt a grudging respect for how quickly Theron had adapted to this new reality. He was not just reacting emotionally to the mate bond, he was thinking several moves ahead, planning for contingencies and outcomes she had not even considered. That was what made him Alpha King, she supposed. Not just strength or dominance, but the ability to see the bigger picture and make the hard choices. All right. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and made the conscious decision to stop fighting against the inevitable. All right. We do it your way. At least for now. I stay in your rooms tonight. We face Alpha Ren together tomorrow, and we figure out the rest as we go. She met his eyes, letting him see the fear and uncertainty still swirling in her own. But I need you to promise me something, Theron. Promise me that if this gets to be too much, if the political pressure or the danger or the weight of expectations becomes more than I can handle, you will let me go. You will not force me to stay in a situation that destroys me just because the prophecy says we are supposed to be together. I need to know that I still have agency here, that this bond does not mean I lose the right to choose my own path, even if that path leads away from you. For a long moment, Theron did not respond, his silver eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her want to look away. Then he nodded slowly, and she saw something that looked almost like pain flash across his features. I promise, if you ever truly want to leave, if staying with me becomes worse than running alone, I will let you go. I will not like it, and my wolf will rage against it, and it will probably damage us both given how complete the bond is now. But I will not keep you prisoner, Nora. Not through force, not through manipulation, not through the mate bond itself. You will always have the right to choose, even if that choice breaks both of us. He extended his hand again, and this time when she took it, she felt the weight of that promise settling between them like a sacred oath. Now come. We have an alpha to face, and a life to start building, assuming we can survive the political fallout of the next 24 hours. They walked back through the forest together, hand in hand, the pendant still glowing softly beneath Nora's dress, where it now hung openly, rather than hidden. The pack house loomed ahead, lights blazing in the council room windows, where Alpha Ren and his advisors were undoubtedly crafting their accusations and demands. Nora could hear raised voices carrying on the night air, could smell the tension and anticipation of wolves gathering for what they thought would be a simple matter of pack discipline. They had no idea that the frightened Omega they wanted to punish was actually the last daughter of an ancient bloodline, that she was mate to their Alpha King, that her very existence represented a prophecy that could change the balance of power across the entire kingdom. They had no idea that by targeting her, they had stepped into something far bigger and more dangerous than a simple theft investigation. "Are you ready?" Theron squeezed her hand as they approached the main entrance, and Nora felt his strength flowing through the bond, steady and certain and utterly unshakable. It should have annoyed her, that confidence, but instead she found herself drawing on it, using it to shore up her own crumbling resolve. She had survived Garrett's massacre, had survived 8 years of running and hiding, had survived forcing her wolf into dormancy and suppressing everything that made her who she was. She could survive this too. She could walk into that council room with her head held high, could face whatever accusations Alpha Wren wanted to make, could claim her place at Theron's side even if every instinct screamed at her to run back into the forest and disappear into the night. She was Nora Silvius, last of Silver Moon, carrier of ancient magic and fated mate to the Alpha King. And she was done hiding. No. She answered honestly, because if she was going to do this, if she was going to trust him with her truth, she might as well start with radical honesty. "I am absolutely not ready. I am terrified and exhausted and still half convinced this is all going to blow up in our faces. But I am going to do it anyway, because apparently I am incapable of making good decisions when it comes to you." She managed a weak smile, and Theron laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his face into something almost boyish. "So, let us go face your council meeting and my probable execution, and see if we can somehow survive long enough to figure out what comes next. If nothing else, it should be an interesting story to tell our hypothetical grandchildren someday." That is the spirit. Theron pushed open the doors to the pack house, and Nora felt every eye in the entrance hall turn toward them, felt the collective shock as wolves registered that the Alpha King was holding hands with the Omega, who had been accused of theft. She heard gasps and whispers, saw Beta Marcus's satisfied smile from where he stood near the council room entrance, saw Alpha Wren's jaw drop as he emerged from a side hallway, and registered their joined hands and the way Theron positioned himself slightly in front of her in automatic protection. "Alpha Wren?" Theron's voice cut through the rising murmur of shocked conversation like a blade. "I understand you wanted to discuss accusations of theft. Shall we move this to the council room so we can address your concerns properly? I believe you will find the situation is rather different than you expected." Alpha Wren sputtered, his weathered face cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning understanding in rapid succession. He was an older wolf, his dark hair streaked heavily with silver, and he had led Moonridge for nearly 30 years with competent if uninspired leadership. He was not a bad alpha, Nora had observed during her 3 years here, but he was also not particularly perceptive or strong-willed. He followed tradition, deferred to more powerful wolves, and generally avoided conflict when possible, which was probably why someone had found it so easy to manipulate him into calling this council meeting in the first place. The question was who, and what they had hoped to gain, by forcing a confrontation over a theft that Nora suspected had never actually occurred. "Your Majesty, I do not understand." Alpha Wren's voice wavered slightly, uncertainty clear in every syllable. "The Omega, Nora. She was seen near the storage vaults tonight, and when we went to inventory, the contents we discovered that several valuable items were missing. Historical artifacts that belonged to Moonridge's ancestral collection. I was simply going to conduct a search to recover them and determine how they had been taken." His eyes darted between Theron and Nora, clearly trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he thought he knew. "I meant no disrespect to you, Your Majesty. I had no idea that she was, that you and she were. I never would have made accusations if I had known." He trailed off, looking miserable and confused. and Nora felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for him. He was being used. Probably had been fed false information, or had evidence planted specifically to create this situation, and now he was trapped between his duty to his pack and his fear of offending the Alpha King. What items were taken? Nora heard her own voice asking the question before she consciously decided to speak, surprising herself as much as everyone else. From the storage vaults, what exactly is missing? She felt Theron's approval through the bond, warm and encouraging, and drew strength from it. If she was going to do this, if she was going to step into this new role as Alpha King's mate and eventually reveal her true identity, she needed to stop being passive, needed to start asking questions and demanding answers rather than simply accepting whatever was said about her. Because I have not been anywhere near the storage vaults tonight or any other night. I have no reason to go there, no access even if I wanted it, and no interest in whatever historical artifacts you keep locked away. So either someone is lying about seeing me there, or they saw someone they mistook for me, or this entire theft is fabricated specifically to create an accusation against me. Which scenario do you think is most likely, Alpha Wren? The older Alpha looked like he wanted to sink through the floor, his discomfort palpable as more and more pack members gathered to watch the drama unfold. A pendant, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. A very old pendant with strange markings, part of a collection that was inherited when Moonridge absorbed the territory of a dissolved pack decades ago. It had been in storage for years, mostly forgotten, until someone mentioned tonight that it might be valuable and we should inventory it properly. When we checked, the case was empty. And you were seen, Nora, by multiple witnesses, walking through that area earlier this evening. He straightened slightly, some of his confidence returning as he repeated what he had clearly been told. I have 3 separate pack members who claim they saw you near the vaults around the same time the theft must have occurred. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Nora felt cold certainty wash over her, understanding clicking into place with sickening clarity. Someone knew who she was. Someone had figured out her identity, had known about the pendant she had been hiding for 8 years, and had arranged this entire situation to either force her to reveal herself or be convicted of theft and possibly executed. It was elegant in its cruelty, she had to admit. If she denied stealing the pendant, she would be accused of lying, and they would search her quarters and the surrounding areas until they found it. Once they found it, questions would be asked about why an Omega possessed such a valuable artifact, and her carefully constructed false identity would crumble. If she admitted to having the pendant, she would have to explain where it came from, which would lead to the same exposure. And if she ran, which every instinct still screamed at her to do, she would be confirming guilt and would lose any chance of ever reclaiming her life or her position. The only way out was forward. The only option was the truth, or at least a strategic version of it. Nora felt Theron's hand tighten on hers, felt his certainty and support flowing through the bond, and made her choice. The pendant in question is mine. Her voice rang clear in the suddenly silent entrance hall, carrying to every wolf who had gathered to watch. It came from my family, my mother specifically, and it is the only thing I have left from my life before I came to Moonridge. I did not steal it from your storage vaults, Alpha Wren. Someone else stole it from me, probably months ago when I first buried it near the ancient willow to keep it safe from theft or questions. They kept it hidden until tonight, until they could manufacture a situation where I would be accused and you would be forced to act. She pulled the pendant out from beneath her dress, letting it hang visible for everyone to see, the runes still glowing faintly in the dim light. This is mine. By right of blood and inheritance, and I will swear that truth before the moon itself, if you require it. The gasps were louder this time, shock rippling through the crowd as they registered the glowing runes and the obvious power radiating from the pendant. These were not sophisticated city wolves who had seen displays of ancient magic before. These were simple pack members who thought power came from physical strength and political alliances, who had probably never seen anything like the Sylvia's bloodline magic in their entire lives. She could see fear in some faces, awe in others, and calculating interest in a few that made her want to hide all over again. But she forced herself to stand tall, to meet their stares without flinching, to claim her space in this moment, even though it terrified her. That pendant belongs to Moonridge Pack. The voice came from the back of the crowd, cold and feminine, and dripping with barely concealed venom. It was part of the artifacts we inherited when we absorbed Silver Moon territory 8 years ago, spoils of war that became our property by right of conquest. Whatever claims this Omega makes about blood inheritance are irrelevant. She is a thief, and she should be punished as such. The crowd parted reluctantly, revealing a tall woman with dark hair and sharp features, her expensive clothing marking her as someone of importance, despite Nora not recognizing her from her time in the pack. Or are we to believe that the Alpha King's supposed mate just happens to have a family connection to an artifact from a pack that was destroyed before she even arrived here? The coincidence seems rather convenient, does it not? Nora's wolf snarled, recognizing a threat even if she could not yet identify its source. And she felt Theron go absolutely still beside her, the kind of predatory stillness that preceded violence. "And you are?" His voice was deadly quiet, each word precisely articulated in a way that made the woman take an involuntary step back. "Because I do not recall Alpha Wren mentioning that he had invited outside observers to this pack's internal business, and you are clearly not part of Moonridge's core leadership." His eyes narrowed, silver irises seeming to glow in the dim light. "In fact, you smell like Garrett's old territory, the Northwood pack that was disbanded after his execution. Which means you have very specific reasons for caring about artifacts from Silver Moon, do you not? Personal reasons. Perhaps. Reasons that have nothing to do with pack law or proper ownership, and everything to do with completing what Garrett started?" The woman paled, her composure cracking for just a moment, before she rebuilt it with visible effort. "My name is Sylvia Ashmore, former beta of Northwood Pack, and I have been granted temporary sanctuary in Moonridge, while I petitioned for permission to establish a new pack in unclaimed territory. My concerns about proper artifact ownership are legitimate, as is my observation that this Omega's story is suspiciously convenient." She lifted her chin defiantly, though Nora could see the fear lurking beneath her bravado. "If you are going to invoke ancient rights and claim her as mate, Your Majesty, should we not verify that she is who she claims to be? That her connection to this pendant is legitimate, and not simply an elaborate deception? After all, there are wolves who would do anything to gain access to the Alpha King's favor, including fabricating false lineages and stolen identities. You would know all about fabrication, would you not?" Nora found her voice again, anger burning away the last of her fear and uncertainty. "Because you were there the night Garrett attacked Silver Moon. You were part of the group that burned our ancestral grounds and slaughtered my family. I remember you, Sylvia Ashmore. I remember your face in the torchlight. Remember you laughing as my mother tried to protect me. Remember you personally killing my youngest brother, because he would not stop crying." The words poured out, 8 years of suppressed rage and grief fueling them, and she saw Sylvia's expression confirm the truth before the other woman could even attempt to deny it. "You wanted this pendant then, wanted all the Silver Moon artifacts because Garrett believed they would give him access to ancient power. But you never found them because my mother hid them too well, scattered them across different territories to prevent exactly what you are trying to do now. And somehow you found this one, traced it here to Moonridge, and decided to use it to either expose me or frame me for theft. Tell me, did you expect the Alpha King to be my mate? Did you plan for that complication? Or did you think you could simply eliminate me quietly and claim the pendant for yourself?" The silence that followed was absolute, every wolf in the entrance hall frozen as they processed what Nora had just revealed. She saw understanding dawn on Alpha Wren's face, saw Beta Marcus's hand drop to his weapon in automatic response to confirmed threat, saw Theron's expression shift into something cold and terrible that promised violence. But it was Sylvia's reaction that confirmed everything, the way her composure finally shattered completely, and her eyes darted toward the nearest exit as if calculating her chances of escape. She would not make it, Nora knew. Not with Theron between her and freedom. Not with his personal guard now alert and responding to the threat. Not with the truth finally exposed where it could not be hidden again. Sylvia Ashmore. Theron's voice cut through the tension like a blade, each word falling with the weight of judgment and authority. You are hereby accused of conspiracy to commit murder, theft of ancestral artifacts, and violation of sanctuary laws by using Moonridge territory to pursue personal vendettas. You will be taken into custody immediately and held for formal trial before the Council of the Alphas when we convene next month. If you resist, if you attempt to flee, if you do anything other than submit peacefully, I will personally ensure that your death is as prolonged and painful as what you inflicted on Nora's family 8 years ago. He did not raise his voice, did not need to, and Sylvia crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, her defiance evaporating in the face of absolute certainty that she had lost. Beta Marcus, please escort our guest to the holding cells. Make sure she is comfortable. But under no circumstances is she to be left alone or allowed to communicate with anyone outside this pack. Is that understood? Perfectly, Your Majesty. Marcus moved forward with 2 of his guards, and Sylvia went with them without resistance, though Nora saw the hatred burning in her eyes as she was led away. That hatred would not disappear, she knew, would not fade even when Sylvia faced justice for her crimes. Some wounds were too deep, some losses too profound, and the woman who had helped destroy Silver Moon would carry that evil with her until the day she died. Nora should have felt satisfaction at seeing her captured, should have felt some sense of closure or justice, but all she felt was exhaustion and a hollow ache where her family used to live in her memories. Alpha Wren stepped forward hesitantly, his weathered face creased with concern and what looked like genuine remorse. Nora, I must apologize. I was manipulated, used by that woman to attack you without knowing the full truth. If I had realized who you were, what you had survived, I would never have allowed her to orchestrate this situation. He glanced at Theron, seeking permission to continue, and received a slight nod. Moonridge Pack recognizes your claim to the pendant and offers our profound apologies for any distress caused by tonight's events. If there is anything we can do to make amends, any support you require as you adjust to your new position, you need only ask. He bowed formally, a gesture of deep respect that made Nora uncomfortable in its sincerity. She did not want his apologies or his offers of support. She just wanted to stop existing in the spotlight, to find somewhere quiet, where she could process everything that had happened in the past few hours without an audience of dozens watching her every reaction. Thank you, Alpha Wren. Theron spoke for both of them, recognizing her exhaustion, even if she had not voiced it aloud. Your apology is accepted, and Moonridge's reputation remains intact. This was not a failure of your leadership, but a consequence of allowing an enemy to hide among you. Learn from it, increase your vetting procedures for sanctuary requests, and we will consider the matter closed. He paused, his hand still firmly holding Nora's, grounding her when she felt like she might simply float away from the unreality of it all. Now, if you will excuse us. My mate has had an exceptionally difficult evening and requires rest. We will be in my quarters for the remainder of the night. Please ensure we are not disturbed unless there is an emergency that requires my immediate attention. The crowd parted as they walked through, and Nora felt the weight of their stares following her every step. She heard whispers starting up behind them, speculation and gossip that would only grow as the night progressed, and the story spread throughout the pack and eventually beyond. By morning, every alpha in the kingdom would know that Theron Nightshade had found his mate, that she was connected to the destroyed Silver Moon pack, that she carried a pendant with ancient power that glowed in her presence. The secret she had guarded for 8 years was well and truly exposed now, and there was no putting it back in the box no matter how much part of her still wanted to try. She had claimed her identity publicly, had admitted her connection to Silver Moon, had revealed the pendant's existence, if not its full significance. The prophecy was in motion. Now whether she liked it or not, and all she could do was hold on and hope that Theron's confidence in their ability to handle what came next was justified. His quarters were nothing like the cramped Omega room she had been living in for 3 years. They occupied the entire top floor of the pack house, spacious and well-appointed with windows that overlooked the forest and mountains beyond. There was a sitting area with comfortable furniture, a workspace with maps and documents scattered. Across a large desk, and through an open doorway, she could see a bedroom with a bed large enough to sleep 4 people comfortably. Everything spoke of power and wealth and status, a sharp contrast to the simple poverty she had been living with for so long that she almost could not process the difference. Theron watched her take it in, his expression unreadable, and she wondered what he was thinking. If he regretted claiming her, maybe, now that the emotional high of the mate bond revelation had faded and reality was settling in. If he was calculating how to integrate an emotionally damaged, politically complicated mate into his carefully ordered life. If he was already regretting his promise to let her leave if it became too much. "I can hear you thinking from here." His voice was gentle, tinged with amusement, and Nora realized she had been standing frozen in the middle of the sitting room for who knew how long. "Stop catastrophizing and come sit down before you fall down. You have been running on adrenaline and willpower for hours now, and you are about to crash hard if you do not rest." He guided her to a couch, his hand warm on the small of her back, and she sank into the cushions with a sigh of relief. Her legs did feel weak, now that he mentioned it, and her hands were shaking with fine tremors that spoke of shock and exhaustion catching up to her all at once. "I'm going to get you some food and water. When was the last time you ate?" He paused, waiting for an answer, and Nora had to think back through the chaos of the evening to remember. Breakfast, she thought. Maybe. She had been too nervous about moving the pendant again to eat much during the day, and by the time evening came around, she had been too focused on watching patrol patterns and planning her midnight excavation to think about something as mundane as food. This morning. Maybe. I am not entirely sure. She admitted, and Theron cursed softly under his breath. He disappeared into what she assumed was a kitchen area, returning moments later with bread, cheese, fruit, and a large glass of water that he pressed into her hands with the kind of gentle insistence that brooked no argument. Nora ate because he was watching, and she did not have the energy to fight about it, and was surprised to discover how hungry she actually was once she started. The food helped, settling her churning stomach and providing a focus other than the relentless spiral of her thoughts. Theron sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth, and simply waited while she ate. He did not push for conversation or demand explanations, or do any of the things she half expected. He just gave her space to breathe and recover, and she felt a surge of gratitude that threatened to undo what little composure she had left. "Thank you." The words seemed inadequate for everything he had done tonight, for the protection and claiming and patient understanding he had shown. But they were all she had. For all of it. For not letting them search for the pendant, for believing me about Sylvia, for not demanding explanations or proof or anything else you would have every right to ask for. She set down the empty glass and pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them in a posture that was pure self-comfort. "I know this is not what you expected when you came to Moonridge for the trials. I know having a mate who comes with an 8-year-old vendetta, a prophecy, that may or may not destroy the kingdom, And enough political baggage to sink a fleet was probably not on your agenda. If you want to rethink the claiming, if you want to invoke some obscure law that lets you undo mate bonds that were recognized under duress or false pretenses, I would understand. I would not like it, because despite every reasonable objection, I apparently already care about you more than is probably healthy, but I would understand. Theron was quiet for so long that Nora thought maybe she had finally said something that pushed him too far, that acknowledged the impossible situation they were in too directly for him to ignore. But when she finally worked up the courage to look at him, she found him watching her with an expression that was equal parts exasperated and fond, as if she had said something foolish but endearing, rather than a legitimate offer to release him from an obligation he had not chosen. Nora. He said her name like a sigh, like a prayer, like something precious that he was afraid to break. I am going to say this once, clearly, so that there is no confusion or room for your catastrophic thinking to twist it into something else. I do not want to undo the claiming. I do not regret recognizing you as my mate. I do not care about political baggage or prophecies or 8-year-old vendettas, except as obstacles we will handle together. You are mine, as surely as I am yours, and nothing that happened tonight or could happen tomorrow will change that fundamental truth. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his large hand. I have been Alpha King for 15 years, Nora. 15 years of making decisions that affect thousands of lives, of navigating political complications that would make your situation look simple, of dealing with threats and challenges and responsibilities that never stop coming. And in all those years, I have never felt what I felt the moment I saw you across that feast. Hall. Recognition. Certainty. The absolute bone-deep knowledge that I had found something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth risking everything I have built. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she had not realized had fallen. So please, stop offering me exit strategies, or trying to convince me that you are not worth the trouble. You are worth it. You will always be worth it. And I am in this for however long you will let me stay. The dam broke completely then. All the fear and grief and overwhelming emotion of the past 8 years pouring out in sobs that shook her entire body. Nora cried for her family, for her lost pack, for the girl she had been before that terrible night changed everything. She cried for the 3 years she had spent in Moonridge being invisible, for the 5 years before that running from shadows and jumping at unexpected sounds. She cried for the future she was terrified to hope for the mate bond that felt too good to be true, for the prophecy that promised either salvation or destruction with no middle ground. And through it all, Theron held her, solid and patient, and completely unshakable, his presence the only thing anchoring her to reality, as everything she had been holding together for so long finally fell apart. When the storm passed and she had no tears left to cry, Nora found herself curled against Theron's chest, with his arms wrapped securely around her, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. She felt hollowed out and exhausted, but also somehow lighter, as if releasing everything she had been carrying had created space for something new to grow. I am sorry. Her voice was hoarse, scraped raw from crying, but she forced the words out anyway. I did not mean to fall apart like that. You must think I am incredibly weak and unstable, and completely unsuited to be anyone's mate, let alone an Alpha King's. She tried to sit up, to put some distance between them, and regain some shred of dignity. But Theron's arms tightened just enough to keep her where she was without restricting her ability to move if she truly wanted to. I think you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. His words were quiet, but absolutely certain. No room for doubt or argument. I think you survived circumstances that would have broken most wolves, that you sacrificed pieces of yourself to stay alive, and that you are still here fighting when it would have been easier to give up 1,000 times over. That is not weakness, Nora. That is strength of a kind that most people will never understand or possess. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. As for being suited to be my mate, you are the only one who gets to decide that. Not me, not the prophecy, not anyone else. If you wake up tomorrow and decide this is too much, that you would rather go back to running alone, then we figure out how to manage that without destroying either of us. But if you decide to stay, to give this bond a real chance, then we build something together that neither of us could build alone. Those are your options, and they will always be your options. No pressure, no obligations beyond what you choose to accept. I promised you agency, Nora, and I meant it. She believed him. Against every reasonable instinct, despite 8 years of evidence that trusting anyone was dangerous, Nora believed that Theron meant exactly what he said. He would let her go if she asked, even though it would hurt them both. He would respect her choices, even when they complicated his life. He would protect her without trying to control her, support her without demanding she become someone she was not. It was everything she had never dared to hope for, and more than she thought she deserved. And the realization was almost as overwhelming as the mate bond itself. I want to stay. The words came out barely louder than a whisper, but they felt momentous anyway, like stepping off a cliff and hoping the ground would rise to meet her, rather than let her fall. Not because of the prophecy or political necessity, or even the mate bond, though that certainly makes it easier. I want to stay because for the first time in 8 years, I felt safe tonight. You made me feel safe, Theron. Even in the middle of chaos and accusations and exposure of every secret I have been guarding, that is not something I am willing to walk away from without at least trying to see where it leads. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes, letting him see the determination mixed with lingering fear in her own. So, yes, I am staying. I am going to be your mate in truth, not just in title, and we are going to figure out this prophecy and the political complications and all the rest of it together. And if it all goes catastrophically wrong, at least we will fail spectacularly while trying to do something meaningful instead of hiding from the possibility of connection. Theron's smile was brilliant, transforming his harsh features into something almost beautiful. And Nora felt answering warmth bloom in her chest through the mate bond. Then welcome home, Nora Silvius, last daughter of Silvermoon and mate to the Nightshade King. I promise to make the spectacular catastrophe worth your while. He stood, pulling her up with him, and gestured toward the bedroom. Now, you are going to sleep because you are dead on your feet, and tomorrow will bring enough challenges without adding exhaustion to the list. The bed is more than large enough for both of us, but if you are not comfortable with that yet, I can take the couch out here. No pressure, no expectations, just rest. He paused, then added with a hint of mischief that made him seem younger and less intimidating. Though, for the record, I am an excellent cuddler, and the bed is significantly more comfortable than the couch. Your choice entirely. Nora laughed, surprising herself with the sound, and made her decision. She had already chosen to stay, already committed to giving this bond a real chance. Sleeping in separate rooms when they were already mates seemed like unnecessary distance, especially when every instinct she possessed wanted to curl up against him and let his presence chase away the nightmares that had haunted her sleep for 8 years. The bed sounds perfect, and I will take you up on that cuddling offer, assuming the offer stands for mates who are emotionally unstable and cry without warning. She let him guide her toward the bedroom, exhaustion pulling at her with every step, and barely registered changing into a sleep shirt he provided before she was collapsing onto the most comfortable mattress she had ever experienced in her life. Theron joined her moments later, pulling her back against his chest with an arm draped protectively over her waist, and Nora felt herself relaxing into his warmth, despite every year of training that told her to stay alert and watchful. Sleep, little mate. His voice was already drowsy, and she felt him nuzzling into her hair in a gesture that was pure wolf behavior. "I have you. Nothing is getting past me to hurt you. Not tonight or any night. You are safe here, Nora. You can finally stop running." And incredibly, impossibly, she believed him. For the first time in 8 years, Nora Silvius closed her eyes without fear of what the morning would bring, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The prophecy still waited to be fulfilled. Political complications still loomed on the horizon, and somewhere in the kingdom, Sylvia Ashmore sat in a cell, planning revenge. But none of that mattered right now, in this moment, wrapped in the arms of her mate, with the mate bond humming contentedly between them. She had stopped running, had chosen to stand and fight, had reclaimed her name and her identity and her future. Everything else could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, she was simply Nora, finally home after years of wandering, finally safe after years of fear, finally whole after years of being broken. And as she drifted off to sleep with Theron's steady heartbeat beneath her ear and the pendant warm against her chest, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the prophecy was not about destruction after all. Maybe it was about healing. Maybe it was about second chances, and found families, and building something beautiful from the ruins of what had been lost. Maybe, against all odds and expectations, she and Theron could actually make this work. But those were thoughts for tomorrow, when she was rested and ready to face whatever came next. Tonight, she simply let herself be held, let herself be protected, let herself finally rest.